Somewhere between the glow of 1,000 screens and the constant buzz of notifications, a generation is growing up in a storm of attention. Gen Z was born into light that never goes dark, voices that never quiet, feeds that never stop. Every moment hums, with choices what to watch, what to post, what to feel. And somewhere inside all that noise, the muscle of discipline begins to atrophy. This is not laziness. It is overstimulation disguised as connection. The modern world has rewired the human reward system so thoroughly that stillness feels unnatural. When a young person tries to focus, the mind rebels. It is trained for motion, not depth. Energy that once would have been forged into art, invention, or conviction now scatters across endless scrolls. The tragedy is quiet and invisible, potential dissolving in dopamine. Attention diffused before it ever gathers into purpose. Discipline was once a matter of environment. The external world demanded it. You had to wait, to build, to labor for gratification. Now the environment offers everything instantly, leaving the inner world untested. Gen Z stands at the edge of a paradox: unlimited information but diminished integration. They can learn any skill, but struggle to sit through the first hour of practice. The ability to hold one's energy, to delay its release until it becomes creation, has become the rarest currency of all. Psychologists call it executive function. Philosophers once called it will. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that, without it, the self begins to dissolve into algorithmic behavior. The modern battlefield is invisible, fought not with weapons but with attention spans. Whoever controls your focus controls your future. Inside this reality, energy discipline is not a monastic virtue. It's a survival mechanism. The human nervous system was never meant to absorb 1,000 emotional signals before breakfast. Each ping, each image, each opinion demands a fragment of psychic energy. Gen Z's fatigue is not weakness, it is the body's protest against excess input. Yet within that exhaustion lies a hidden key: awareness. To realize that your energy is being harvested is to begin reclaiming it. The first step toward mastery is noticing how scattered you feel. The second is daring to pause when everything urges speed. In that pause, life reappears. The breath, the heartbeat, the unspectacular moment. The power to focus is not taught. It is remembered, like a lost language of stillness that every human once spoke. But stillness is uncomfortable. The moment Gen Z attempts silence, the accumulated noise rushes in. Unfinished conversations, comparisons, fears of missing out. That is why meditation feels impossible to many. It doesn't quiet the mind. It confronts it. Yet mastery begins exactly there. The discipline of energy is not suppression, but transmutation. It means noticing the urge to escape and choosing to stay. It means converting anxiety into awareness, distraction into design. The modern mystic does not live in a cave. He or she lives online, surrounded by temptation, yet learns to use the tools instead of being used by them. Every scroll resisted is not repression. It's redirection, a micro-act of sovereignty. Over time, those micro-acts accumulate into presence, and presence becomes gravity. In a small apartment above the noise of a sleepless city lived a young man named Aaron, 22, part of the generation that never knew silence. His phone was his alarm, his map, his companion, his mirror. He woke to the blue light before dawn and fell asleep to it long after midnight. Between those hours, his attention was a currency everyone wanted to spend. Music, memes, news, outrage, inspiration, everything collided in his mind until thinking itself felt like buffering. Aaron wasn't lazy. He was overloaded. Every night he promised himself that tomorrow he'd change, study harder, work out, finish the project that would prove his worth. But every morning, he woke already behind, scrolling for a spark that never came. One night, power flickered across the neighborhood. The screens went black, Wi-Fi died. Outside, the city murmured in confusion. For the first time in years, Aaron heard something strange, his own breathing. At first the silence felt hostile, like withdrawal. He paced the room, restless hands searching for distraction. But after a few minutes, something softened. Without the constant pulse of updates, time stretched wide. He found an old notebook, blank except for a single quote he'd written in school. "He who masters himself conquers all." He didn't remember why he'd written it, but the words hit differently now. For the first time, he wondered whether the noise wasn't the problem but the way he'd surrendered to it. When the lights returned, Aaron didn't rush to his phone. He sat still, feeling the residue of quiet like a strange new strength. The next morning, he tried an experiment. He left his phone on the kitchen table and walked to class without it. The first few minutes felt unbearable, as if he'd left a piece of himself behind. But then the world widened. Sounds returned, wind through buildings, footsteps on concrete, distant laughter. By the time he reached campus, he realized how long it had been since he'd actually seen anything without needing to capture it. That day, he focused longer, spoke slower, listened deeper. Something inside him had shifted, not a revolution, just a reorientation. Days became weeks. Aaron began to treat his attention like savings instead of spare change. He scheduled screen time the way older generations scheduled meals. In the evenings, he ran, cooked, read. The first few weeks were messy relapses, boredom, a sense of missing out. But each small victory built momentum. He discovered that energy is not infinite, it's cultivated. The more he guarded it, the more alive he felt. Friends noticed the difference. "You seem calmer," one said, "more focused." Aaron smiled because he wasn't trying to be calm. He was just less divided. Then came temptation, in a subtler form. His newfound discipline made him productive, and productivity drew attention. Followers grew. Praise poured in. Algorithms began to reward him for his focus, threatening to consume it again. Aaron felt the familiar pull, the desire to prove, to perform, to show everyone how disciplined he'd become. One night, staring at his growing numbers, he remembered the blackout. He turned off his phone and whispered to himself, "Mastery is not a performance." The next morning, he deleted the app for a week. The world didn't end. In fact, it began again. He started channeling his energy into something tangible, a design project he'd abandoned a year earlier. Without constant interruptions, ideas returned with surprising clarity. The project grew into a prototype. The prototype into a small business. Yet even as success arrived, he kept one ritual sacred. Every night before bed, he'd sit in darkness for 5 minutes, phone out of reach, listening to the hum of silence. That silence reminded him that focus was freedom, not confinement. Years later, Aaron would tell younger students that discipline wasn't about rigidity, it was about direction. Energy follows attention. He'd say, "Whatever you give your focus to, you feed." Some listened, some laughed, most scrolled past. But he didn't preach for approval. He spoke because he had lived through the drift and returned to shore. He knew how easy it was to mistake stimulation for growth, noise for knowledge, momentum for meaning. His story was not about quitting technology. It was about reclaiming agency. One evening, during a citywide outage that echoed the one years before, Aaron stood on his balcony watching the skyline dim into stars. From somewhere below, he heard children laughing, their faces lit only by moonlight. In that rare darkness, he saw the shape of the future, still young, still distracted, but capable of awakening. He realized mastery was not a destination, but a daily alignment, as fragile as it was powerful. The world might never grow quieter, but a human being could. And in that silence, even amid the roar of modern life, energy became light again, steady, directed, alive. To understand why many fail is to see how clever the system is. The economy of distraction depends on restlessness. The more agitated you are, the more predictable your behavior. Advertisers don't sell products. They sell relief from the tension that their own media creates. Energy discipline, then, becomes a quiet rebellion. When a person reclaims focus, they stop feeding the machine. This rebellion doesn't shout, it simply refuses to scatter. Imagine millions choosing creation over consumption, craft over commentary. The algorithms would starve. That possibility frightens the architects of the attention economy. Because a generation that learns to hold its energy, learns to hold its destiny. Paragraph 6. Yet the path is lonely. Mastery requires friction, and modern culture hates discomfort. Gen Z has inherited a world that equates ease with progress. But growth is friction by design. The resistance that shapes strength. The gym hurts, the canvas resists the brush, the page mocks the empty mind. Energy discipline asks for this friction willingly. It transforms pain into pattern, repetition into ritual. When you wake early to work on something no one else believes in, you participate in an ancient ceremony, the conversion of potential into form. Each disciplined act is a statement that meaning still matters. And though the world may never applaud it, that quiet perseverance restores integrity to the human spirit. Paragraph 7. There are glimpses of awakening already. Some young creators are trading virality for vision, practicing deep work, deleting apps, meditating, journaling, walking alone. They sense that fulfillment is not found in the feed, but in the focused act. This small cultural undercurrent could be the beginning of renewal. If Gen Z learns to value attention as sacred, they may lead a renaissance of authenticity. Their energy, once reclaimed, can power new sciences, new art, new empathy. But every transformation begins with individuals willing to endure boredom, silence, and solitude, the crucibles of concentration. The discipline to stay with oneself is the seed of all greatness. Paragraph 8. Still, the warning remains. If energy continues to leak through endless distraction, the cost will not be merely personal, it will be civilizational. A people who cannot concentrate cannot sustain democracy, love deeply, or create beauty. The screen will think for them, desire for them, dream for them. The caution is not moral but existential, mastery or drift. Every generation faces a test that defines its soul. For Gen Z, that test is focus. The question is whether they will rediscover the strength to hold their own energy long enough to build something real. Because in the end, the mind that cannot pause becomes a mirror for someone else's agenda. And the life that cannot gather its light eventually fades into the noise it never learned to silence. Before we conclude, Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and do not forget to drop your location in the comments side. Love to know where you are watching from, and if you ever have any questions, join our Telegram channel where we interact directly and help each other grow. The link is in the description.